Now, we've not to argue, because Starstuff will be annoyed with us.
Yeah. We're allowed to argue, just not on, like, how long the podcast is.
Debate.
Yes. I mean, that's kind of the point, otherwise it's not very... what are you doing?
Stop criticising me before we even start.
Yeah, but, like, what are you doing? I just genuinely want to know. What the fuck are you doing? I'm curious, okay? Right, are we ready to begin?
I just searched for Google.
You old person. Or just say it as your homepage.
Yeah, but I don't want it as my homepage. Should we start?
Okay, whatever.
It's like old times, this, isn't it? Should we get started before we say something that we should say while we're actually on the air, as it were?
Cool.
I'm going to get all podcasty.
What does that mean?
I don't know. You're going all TV, aren't you?
What?
You're doing your TV presenter face thing.
I'm getting prepared to actually start the video.
Okay.
Well, yeah, well, just be disgusting in the background. Just go.
You be an anchor. You be a TV person, and I'll be a pod person.
You'll be a Jabba the Hutt.
I'm the sound guy.
Mm-hmm.
Sound is a pound.
Mm-hmm. Round at the pound.
Fuck you.
Hello Internet, I am Firebolt.
And I'm the Orbiter.
And welcome to Breaking Bollocks, episode 35? 35.
I believe so.
Jesus, that's quite a lot actually now.
You don't need to call me Jesus. I do
Fuck
exist.
Okay, this is a weird tangent, but I think he probably did exist.
We already got onto religion. Fuck, that's not a good start.
An insane person, or just a lot of the people that believed that he was the Messiah were insane people, or just.
I feel like this is like coming home.
It's like coming home.
Yeah, this is our first new or old. I'm not making any sense, am I? Original format Breaking Bollocks. This is our first recording that's back to basics, as it were. This is the first one we've done on the new reduced schedule.
Yeah, I guess.
So, and I also feel a lot closer to our listeners, simply because...
Well, we have our camera back.
Well, yeah, we got our camera, but hello, YouTube. But the other thing is, this is going out within a week. Yeah. This will be out.
So that, if you didn't listen to our Magnaflorious update...
Shame.
Well, it's a relatively long update, so... We'll
yeah, but I like the idea of chasing somebody naked through the streets, ringing a bell and throwing shit at them.
I don't think the nun threw the shit, but that's spoilers anyway.
There'll be more of those.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking in like, because we're now sort of merging a little bit of the Bollocks report, which has been discontinued for an indefinite, possibly infinite amount of time.
Yeah, so let's do some news catch up. I've got a thing.
Just let me explain.
There's two things I want to say.
Just let me explain.
You've already explained in the announcement.
But they've just been smushed together, and now we're doing Breaking Bollocks every 2 weeks.
Breaking Bollocks is back to normal, basically.
No. It's always been 2 weeks that time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's back to normal in that we do a bit of news catch up first. And then get into the subject.
Okay.
So, welcome to the good old days.
If it was ever normal.
What is normal?
We'll have an episode on that.
Okay. Can we have an episode on Nermal?
What?
Nermal.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Garfield has a friend called Nermal.
Why would we have an episode about that?
Because it sounds like normal.
Or because you're a twat.
That's a possibility too.
Right, what did you want to say?
Well, today, as you're listening to this, the day that this is released, is the European elections.
Oh, I thought it was earlier.
It's Thursday, the 23rd, which is next Thursday. By the way, we're recording this on Friday the 17th.
Is that the date that they're released?
What? What do you mean released?
Like the results that come in?
No, I think... well, I don't know when our results usually come in overnight. We should know by the next day. But the European-wide results, I think the elections are taking place between the 23rd and the 26th across Europe.
Oh, right.
But the UK part of it is the 23rd.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I wanted to get onto, because it is the most sort of pressing thing to do with politics at the moment.
And I'm not entirely sure how I voted.
Yeah, but basically before this, nobody except the people that hated the EU cared, and that's how UKIP owns like a third of the UK seats right now.
I think I've settled on my decision.
Are you happy to divulge?
Yes, I think my decision on this particular one will not necessarily be the same as in a UK general election, but I think I'm probably going to go with Lib Dems.
Okay.
Because my main sort of desire is to keep both the UK and the EU together. And whereas SNP probably have the sort of strongest position on staying in Europe, they also have a position on leaving the UK. So for this, I'm going to go with the one that would keep them both together if they could, which is the Lib Dems.
I follow quite a lot of people that sort of sum up polls and do election maps, because
this may have changed by the time we get to the release date. But
well, the polls are going absolutely mental.
Yeah,
for the
send them back home.
Oh my fucking god! Don't trust the polls, as Nigel Farage would say.
Anyway, sorry, carry on.
So basically, the big sort of new one is the Brexit Party, which, apart from their namesake, nobody really knows what else they stand for, because they've refused to publish a manifesto.
Have they? I didn't know that.
Which has led to a campaign which I quite enjoy, where they try and make the Brexit Party's manifesto with past quotes of their candidates.
Speaking of Europe,
like Anne Widdecombe's marvellous quotes of homosexual acts are wrongful.
Huh.
Nigel Farage saying that the UK should move to insurance-based healthcare, like America.
Speaking of Europe, congratulations to the winners of the Eurovision Song Contest,
which we're watching tomorrow, and it shall be a bob if you're a Patreon.
Yeah, if you want to do a bit of kind of Gogglebox type watching of our Eurovision bingo episode, you'll have to join Patreon. Because that's our monthly Bob. There are like 10 back episodes of Bob to watch as well, and all the uncut stuff as well. So, and there's another piece of news which I would like to cover. I would like us to take a moment's silence to honour the death of Grumpy Cat.
Okay. This is pointless for the...
well, you have to describe it.
This is...
audio description.
This is pointless for our dear listeners, but the Orbiter is doing a characteristic Grumpy Cat face.
Did you know Grumpy Cat was dead?
No.
Well, now you do.
Who or what is Grumpy Cat?
I'm going to use a picture as a thumbnail.
An old internet.
It's not that old. I suppose it's a few years.
It's pretty old in terms of the internet.
It's older than our podcast.
The internet moves pretty quickly.
At light speed.
Probably not quite.
Any more general news or catching up of our stuff?
I'll leave this up to you if you want to discuss it, because there would be spoilers involved. But I've been annoyed at the feedback on Game of Thrones Season 8.
Yeah, I haven't actually said this, but I don't give a shit about the feedback, simply because partly it's, I think, to be honest, I know you stayed up really late putting together a big kind of tweet.
Yeah,
round.
if you want to hear my opinions on it, I guess you can go to Twitter. I put a big thread out on it.
But I
with,
kind of see it
30
as, I mean, half of it's quite possibly bots. Anyway, so,
I don't think so.
but media loves to sow division, and it keeps people talking about something. So it could just, it's like, who gives a fuck? If you don't like it, don't watch it. It's like. It doesn't belong to you anyway, and people who signed this so-called petition to remake it.
Oh yeah,
fucking hell, get a life. There's enough Netflix shit on to go and choose something else if you don't like it.
There are some more reasonable criticisms, like some of the characters are just a bit less witty in their dialogue, which is fair enough because George R.R. Martin just had a way of writing.
Let's face
funny
it,
dialogue.
It's not lost, is it?
No.
So. If you've wasted 7 years watching that shit and then they end up doing what they did. Well, actually, no, it's wasted 7 years watching a brilliant TV series and then they do a shit ending like that. But to me, that worked, that last episode. The final episode on Monday, which will have aired by the time this goes out. So,
I don't think this has been too heavy on spoilers other than just...
Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen...
Some people didn't like how it went.
I think that I think the character arc was pretty much perfect, to be honest. The one that people are complaining about.
I've seen people's criticisms actually sort of contradict each other. Because the thing that I've heard is the way George R.R. Martin writes, which is quite different how most fiction is written, is that he's not trying to create the best or most entertaining situation. He's trying to just follow a logical course of events.
Yeah.
Now, this did happen ages ago, so I'm going to do a minor spoiler for the thing known as the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
Before that, in the War of the Five Kings, even though these battles never took place, Robb Stark was planning out battles that were meant to be, like, I suppose, foreshadowed.
Right.
Because, of course, he would do that, because that's how a war would go, even if he doesn't know that he's going to be brutally murdered at a wedding.
Yeah. Anyway.
People are also complaining that, characters didn't do what they wanted them to do, which is bizarre, contradicting criticism. So I never really know what to expect.
I'm not sure how believable it would be if suddenly everybody was nice and, like, I mean... The particular character that people are moaning about the story arc of, it's like, well, it's just following our family ancestry, it's just kind of, it was, I don't think there was anything, I actually think there was some brilliant, definitely cinematic, some brilliant filmmaking. The scene where, the scene where I is there with the horse, and the sun's kind of coming through a filter, and that I thought that just looked absolutely beautiful, like in a filmography kind of way.
Well, I think a lot of the people are saying that the cinematography is great.
Yeah.
But they just don't like the writing, and
Well, go and write something else.
I would agree with some of the criticisms, but I wouldn't make as big a deal out of it. Like, I think a lot of the things is just turning a minor little gripe about a technical detail.
I just think people like complaining.
Yeah, I think it might be that it's just ending. And I think a lot of people feel a bit miffed that this last season is 6 episodes.
Yeah, but then
so not
a lot of
really
people
having time to flesh out those.
But I think if you kind of just treat seasons 7 and 8 as one season with a mid-season break, it's kind of it makes more sense. And let's face it, pretty much half of the episodes are movie length, so it's kind of anyway. This is not a Game of Thrones podcast, so
yeah.
Any other catch-up?
I will say though, some of the best episodes have been under the newer writers.
Okay.
Any other catch-up? Brexit news. The party crosstalks have broken down.
Ace.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic here. If you've
Not gonna.
That's a good thing.
No, anything that stands a chance of stopping it is good in my book.
Well, it just means that you're kind of taking a risk there, because whilst a deal is pretty shitty, whatever it is, then it's probably better than no deal.
Mm. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't see the point of leaving with a good deal. It's like, but I'm kind of an all or nothing person, you know.
It is funny though when someone tries to make out, well, what good does the EU do? And then there's just a huge list of all the good things. And then,
well, I was saying earlier to Starstuff that
no
I
real
can't
response to that.
I can't make a decision on any of what's going on based on anything other than principle, because anything that you read in the media or any opinions that you get from anyone else are all embroiled in politics, which is going to be the case. But
I would agree to a certain extent where you need to take that sort of thing with a pinch of salt, but like don't just ignore experts' advice because you think that they might be biased.
No, but anything that anyone says, you can hear somebody saying pretty much the polar opposite with as much conviction. So to me, I have to just go with my own principles, which are unity. I mean, as I was saying earlier on, basically what you're talking about is the same thing that you had on Northern Ireland. It's nationalism versus unionism. And I'm a global unionist, if you like. So if it's a choice between
that kind of turns what Northern Ireland was really about kind of the opposite way to what it actually was, because Irish nationalists aren't really what we'd necessarily think of as the same kind of nationalist, although it's still probably quite nationalist, but both sides were pretty nationalist, to be honest.
Yeah, just for different nations. But unionism to me is about staying united with other countries.
But then you could turn that the other way and say that, well, they were for a united Ireland, so they're unionists.
Yeah, in a way, but then it's the same sort of argument as when you're talking about if you've got a choice between being united with 3 other small countries or 27 countries across a continent. You know, it's not a nice choice to have to make, but I'd rather go with the one that unites us with more countries, just because I want to see the whole planet united. Basically, I know it's not an easy political situation to govern.
To be honest, I prefer the I suppose viewpoints of a lot of more of those countries than the ones in the United Kingdom.
Anyway, should we get onto the podcast?
I suppose so, unless there's any other bits of news that you want to discuss.
Well, is there anything in our own lives going on that we want to... Anything to do with the channel?
Ooh, I finished my exams. That's a big deal.
It is. You've got 2 weeks now, haven't you, until you've got to go back?
I think I did all right.
Good.
Which, when I say I think I did all right, loads of people, I think, maybe get a bit miffed because that means that I think I got an A.
You should open your exam results live on camera.
Yeah. I would like to see that myself first.
Okay.
Because I don't want to have to wait until we record another podcast to open them. But
fair enough. Good point.
Anything else? Anything in your life?
Nah, my
Are
life's
you just a
just
boring old man?
No, I'm doing all right.
But nothing like particularly
Busy shit coming up, but that's for Better Call Paul. So.
massive.
So shall we?
Oh yeah. By the way, if you can tell, well, I suppose our dear listeners,
Stella is with us again.
Yeah.
I've probably heard a bit of slurping, and she's not under the table.
Don't say that.
Too late. Just did.
Wanker. Oh no. On with the actual subject.
Yes.
The episode.
While we are still.
What?
While we are still.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm not going to finish your sentence because fuck you. But the subject of the episode is consciousness. And I'm assuming he wanted me to say conscious.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, fuck you.
You're very rude and disrespectful to your old dad.
I know, but respect is earned. Anyway, so what do you want to start with?
Well, I suppose we're probably going to need to approach this from different sort of angles, aren't we? Because there are different definitions. You kind of got to define what we're talking about when we're talking about it. This is the same with every subject. We like definition of what we're talking about, but I think this has different definitions depending on which angle you're approaching from, because there is a scientific sort of physical definition, I suppose.
Not really. There's just sort of a grey area where you can say, well, this thing's probably conscious.
Okay, so are we saying like...
and then there's a difference between sentient, and then there's sapient, and then there's...
Well, there's self-aware as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
So there's levels of consciousness, isn't
and are people in a coma conscious? Even though they're unconscious, but are they...
So the lowest, I suppose, to me, there are different levels of consciousness. And I suppose one would have to say that if you're looking for the beginnings of consciousness, what would the lowest level be? I mean, plants, are they conscious?
It's been shown that they do sort of show a sort of almost pain reaction, but not in any way that would be recognizable as sort of like a brain or anything like that.
I mean, they do grow towards sunlight, don't they? But then that's more of a chemical reaction, isn't it? I would think.
The complicated thing is that we're all just a very complex series of chemical reactions.
See, this is fast entering the subject area, that because you've got to be really careful when you're talking about something like this, because it's very easy to kind of sound like you're disappearing into sort of new age kind of astral plane kind of matrix type stuff. But the thing with the matrix idea to me is a lot of people maybe think that it's all about sort of simulation and stuff, but a matrix is basically a framework, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to me, I think your brain and your organic sort of makeup is a framework for your
everything.
Who you are. Well, your universe, I suppose, is everything that you experience is actually inside you. It's a representation. It's your perception of everything.
The cerebrum's where the cerebrum is where your memory and personality come from, so that's mainly what you would associate with being you. The rest of the bodily functions and stuff are controlled by medulla and cerebellum. See, it does sometimes help to have a biologist, amateur biologist on.
Amateur biologist?
Well, I guess, because I'm not exactly a professional biologist, am I?
Well, Starstuff was mentioning earlier on that she's actually done some, knows something about consciousness, is that right?
A lot I can't remember, but I studied, started studying biological psychology.
Right.
And there was
I remember that, yeah.
a whole bit about defining consciousness, and in terms of biological psychology, it's a different definition than it may be for other people.
Yeah.
Because it's actually more the physical aspect of the brain being conscious.
Right.
And how it's quite complicated.
Is it to do with parts of the brain being electrically active at all? Or?
Yeah, because there's one of the things which they talk about, like free will, where quite often your body makes the decision, or your brain makes the decision after you've carried out the action, if you like, or that's what it appears to be.
This is where I think awareness comes in, because I've been doing a fair amount of stuff on mindfulness, and it's that there's the subconscious, isn't there?
Yeah.
Whatever that is. But they reckon that that's where decisions are kind of made, and then they emerge into the.
I'm not sure how
mind.
Based in science this is, but I have heard it said that you make a judgment on someone in about 0.4 seconds.
Yeah.
your brain does that before you even speak to them.
Yeah, yeah. And that's an automatic response, presumably.
Yeah.
So this is where I don't think it's necessarily helpful to talk in terms of a distinct subconscious and conscious mind as two entities, because I think when I was saying about there being levels of consciousness, I think that the deeper you go inside yourself, if you like, mentally,
I would hope you're not doing it in another way.
No. The more subconscious you get in a way, it's almost like you're constructing layers of I don't know. It's weird talking about. I used to have a friend who talked about
But I mean,
personality being like an onion.
That's been used a lot. But,
Yeah.
Ogres are like onions, you see.
You don't.
Ogres are like onions.
Ogres.
It's a reference to Shrek.
Oh, right, yeah. I used to know Shrek.
What?
Well, I said I used to have a friend that talked about. Never mind.
Whatever. Very insightful conversation. Thank you.
I'm too hot.
Right. So the thing that's sort of forefront in my mind, especially with recent goings on in America, is actually abortion.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the debate comes around when is a fetus sentient.
Well, what does sentient mean?
Well, that's the thing. There's no real, like, clear-cut definition, but you can probably say that a fetus isn't sentient because it's not self-aware, is it? And there's a reasonable argument to actually say that, although I doubt anyone would ever push for this, and I'm not saying that we should be pushing for this. I think, firstly, that abortion is just something that needs to be done. Sometimes it's not exactly like a light-hearted experience. Nobody's going to want them to be like on demand, on tap. You're going to consider that carefully, no matter what the legislation is. And this is just speaking from ignorance, because obviously I've never been in a situation where I'd have to decide about anything like that. But there's a reasonable case to say that even at birth, that baby isn't really sentient.
I think it's about defining the subconscious.
Especially the recent law, which is that after 6 weeks, an abortion will be illegal in some states, in any case, including for rape and incest.
Yeah.
Which has forced 11 and 12-year-old girls to have babies because it's illegal to have them aborted.
Yeah, but that's America. I mean...
Yeah, but it's still real people.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of fucked up shit over there.
Yeah, but that doesn't excuse any of it, and that doesn't mean that you have to be disillusioned by it all or stop caring because it's happening somewhere else. That's how we got to the refugee crisis.
Wow. Crucify me, why not?
Well, I think that a lot of people just sort of turn off, oh, it's happening somewhere else. It's not my issue, until it's like, and then they start screaming, but you're taking my job. And it's like, you didn't fucking care when their house was being blown up. Why are they going to care when they're just working hard for what you perceive to be your job that you never earn anyway?
It's a human rights issue, isn't it?
Although that brings in debates about capitalism.
I mean, my point is that there are countries that are a lot worse.
Yes, but it's the sort of situation of 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, I just don't want to get embroiled in politics when we're talking about consciousness, I suppose.
It does get embroiled sometimes when...
So did we determine
Talking
whether or
about
not we
certain
think
issues.
about plants as being conscious?
I wouldn't say that plants are conscious.
Okay, so, I mean, with there being so much grey area, I suppose it would make sense to talk about what we think of as consciousness and how we think that relates to the subconscious and the self, if you like, and what it actually is.
Okay.
So what would the next evolutionary step from plant life be? Because there are
That's
some
not-
that are kind of...
That's not really how it works. Plants are the plants that we have now are the final step in their evolutionary
Yeah, the
process
plants
so
that we
far.
have now, but plant life evolved into animal life in the past,
No, that never happened.
didn't it?
Branched off.
Branched off.
Bacterial cells, I suppose, sort of branched off into fungi, animals, and plants. In a very simplified way.
Right, okay, so a bacteria conscious.
So sentience never necessarily has to happen. If sentience doesn't actually make you better at reproducing,
Is a dog conscious?
that's an interesting question. I would say so, but I think with some animals, that's where we get into the grey area, and this is where a lot of debate,
Especially
in
elephants and dolphins.
yeah, in particular
they are
intelligent. Oh my god, they are also very intelligent.
Yeah.
Particularly with the animal welfare debate, you get into questions of, well, which animals are really that sentient?
Is a worm conscious?
I
Is it true,
This
the
is
thing
prob-
about worms cutting them in half? I don't think it is it? I think, is that not an urban myth?
Probably. I've never tried it.
I think it's true, actually. Yeah, it regenerates its tail.
Yeah, but you don't get two worms.
No, but it does live on.
Yeah, as long as it's... Well, yeah, but the urban myth I was referring to was about two worms crawling off in different directions.
That might, I don't know, that might be like Chinese whispers people interpreting.
Yeah.
If you cut a worm in two, it'll still live as there'll be two worms living, but it'll
Yeah.
just be like, if you cut the tail off a lizard, you don't have two lizards.
Yeah.
It's just because both halves kind of look the same to us.
So basically, I suppose what I'm meaning is consciousness then could be... It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I was going to say it could be defined as being able to elicit autonomic movement.
Yeah, you can do that subconsciously though.
Well, I was just going to say Venus flytraps as well.
Yeah, I mean, amoeba do that.
Yeah.
Ooh, brilliant video on consciousness from, I believe I've showed you some of their stuff before. Kurzgesagt.
Yeah.
They had a video on consciousness explaining a lot of this that might alleviate some of your confusion. So we can.
Well, it's not confusion. I just...
In different fields, it's defined in different ways.
It's not something that we have like a clear cut thing for.
No.
So it's.
So, but all I'm trying to do is establish a framework for our conversation, what we're actually talking about.
Well, that's the thing. That's where the problem comes in, that consciousness is kind of a fuzzy thing. You can probably say with relative certainty that an amoeba probably, under most definitions, isn't conscious. But then again...
Is a jellyfish conscious?
Yeah.
Doesn't have a central nervous system or a brain.
And I think some people will try to define it with specific things like a brain or central nervous system. I would say that a central nervous system is probably a relatively good definition.
Yeah. But this is, like you say, it's very, very fuzzy, and in different areas, what is defined as consciousness and a mind.
I suppose in terms of
to be-
semantics, what I would like to sort of define it as is something when you can differentiate between a subconscious and a consciousness, because then you're talking about two different concepts. Do you know what I mean? It's all very well saying is something conscious, but unless there's, I suppose a starting point for me would be to define what you think of as the subconscious, and if that exists.
Stuff going on in your brain, regular, and I suppose regular body functions would.
Yeah, they're all done subconsciously. You don't consciously go, I want my heart to beat.
I think generally when people are talking about subconscious, I think they mean the subconscious stuff in the cerebellum, which is the front part of the brain.
So what specifically do you think is going on when people, say for instance, if you sat there now and closed your eyes and listened to what's going on in your mind, and you hear a dialogue going on, your thoughts, if you like, what is it that you're not actually kind of consciously deciding what to think about, you're just listening to the noise that's going on in there. What are you listening to?
That's an interesting thing, I suppose.
Because one of the things that that I've come across recently, I was saying about getting into sort of mindfulness and stuff. One of the things that really kind of occurred to me quite drastically was, having been religious when I was younger, that inner voice, that inner monologue, if you like, is kind of hijacked.
Yeah, it's perceived as this all-knowing compass, which, if you've got a fucked up brain, is pretty dangerous.
It's the voice inside is supposedly God, basically talking to you.
Yeah.
But which makes it really difficult when you come away from religion, because for a long time I struggled with the idea of being in touch with my inner self, because that had always been labelled as God, and I now didn't think that God existed. So I would have to deny the existence of that inner voice.
No, you just have to accept that that's, I suppose, a way of your brain telling you how to sort the world out to your...
I know that now, but when you've all your life that voice has been known as God,
I can see that.
Then it's very difficult to listen to it anymore when you don't believe in God anymore.
Yeah, because also with that comes the idea that that voice, if it's God, has to always be right.
Absolutely.
Which means that you have this idea that, okay, now there's that element of distrust there in yourself.
Yeah.
But
in a way, that's where the awareness part comes in, because it's like I can listen to that inner voice and be
in control of it, I suppose.
Well, not necessarily in control, but kind of take note,
right,
of what it's saying and why it might be saying the things that it says, rather than just thinking it's a voice that somebody can kind of manipulate and,
Also, if you want to, you can change how that voice goes.
Yeah,
you really try.
Well, to me, that's where I think there's potentially a cyclical nature between the conscious and the subconscious, in that I think the most accurate way of making decisions and basing judgments on who you really are and being happy, if you like, is to really listen to your inner voice. But at the same time, you're in charge. Your conscious mind is in charge of what gets put in there.
But be aware that inner dialogue of yours, if you're conscious of it, it's not your subconscious, is it?
Even if you're not directing it. Like, I mean, I suppose a similar kind of concept would be when you're dreaming, where are those storylines and images coming from?
Mostly your, I suppose, imagination, but some of it's a mix of memories and imagination, which is why you sometimes get familiar faces popping up in dreams.
Well, this is why I've been trying. I haven't kind of settled on any kind of theory, really. I'm kind of open-minded about it, but I like the idea of trying to think about how to equate the brain with the architecture of a computer, simply because there is that kind of religious idea of creating things in your own image, if you like. The idea that humans have invented computers, to me suggests that there is an architecture there which is familiar and seems logical to humans. So it would make sense to me that the sort of processing architecture inside computers could quite, you could draw parallels between what's the central processing unit, what's the memory, what's the hard drive, and, what different things do. And whether or not, when you, like in the Matrix, where you load programs in to learn skills, is that not a similar thing to, although it doesn't happen instantaneously, is that not a similar thing to learning about something? You go to a book or you go to an information source and load that information into your brain, and you're essentially installing programs there.
Just quickly speaking of the Matrix, there was actually some pretty complex philosophy from the Wachowski brothers.
Yeah, definitely.
I believe we've said before, possibly
They're sisters now, by the way.
Yeah. And the whole cast had to read up on it and take a test. The only person that passed first time was Lawrence Fishburne. The guy that plays Morpheus.
He's a dude.
Right, so
I'm interested in that, actually. I was just you've got the YouTube page open with some different stuff on consciousness. The psychedelics and consciousness would be something I'd be interested in watching, simply because I've experienced psychedelics, and I know firsthand from the inside, if you like, what from the limited amount I know about what happens in the brain when psychedelic substances have been consumed, I think it just basically fires off synapses chaotically that wouldn't necessarily normally be fired off all at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Which is why you get perception and senses all mixed up with each other. Where there's the idea that you can taste colours and see music and stuff like that, because the senses are kind of mixed up in the brain then, because there are channels opened that aren't normally able to communicate with each other.
On that, have you heard of this is kind of on a tangent from consciousness. Have you heard of synesthesia?
I have, yes. I was just thinking that, yeah.
Where, some people can taste people's names and base their friendships upon that, which I always think must be weird.
But all it is a different pathway in the brain that we're not accustomed to, because
could you imagine,
bats see with their hearing, don't they?
I suppose, yeah.
And I mean, that whole idea of there are different tone colours in music. You've got the blues. It's like, well, where does that term come from? And I know jazz musicians will often talk about different colours of chord, like that chord's like purple or something, and it means something to them because they make an association.
Some people have that with numbers as well, where they'll associate specific colours with certain numbers so strongly that whenever they think of that number, that's all they can think of.
So I suppose an extreme example of that would be hexadecimal code.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt anyone's thinking that in depth about it.
No, sure. Have we just not evolved that far yet?
I have.
That I'm not surprised about. You've invented a colour.
FFF. I have invented a colour.
Do you know the hexadecimal code for your colour?
I can't remember it at the moment.
Would you like to introduce your colour to the world?
It's called Shusha. I can look it up if you like. If I can remember my login.
Anyway. Shusha.
Yeah. Do you want to just quickly watch this video on consciousness? Because it'll explain a lot of the things that you're...
The link will be in the description.
It is.
Feel free to have a listen.
The origin of consciousness, how unaware things became aware.
Before we recommence, is it an opportune moment to either restock or go to the toilet?
Yes. The Orbiter is a goblin.
What did he do?
I think he whispered something, but I don't know what. I didn't hear it.
Never trust a firebolt with an open mic. Sit down. See, I like that idea. The idea of a gradient of consciousness.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to say, like that grey area.
That actually makes more sense to me than what I was saying about levels of consciousness, because that implies more sort of
It
defined
implies
steps.
that there's like it implies that there's a set out path to consciousness, I guess, which isn't how evolution works.
No.
But the idea is basically optimizing how we get food.
The thing is, as well, I think that I mean, it's interesting to think that obviously it's an evolutionary kind of process, that that gradient of complex consciousness, simple to complex consciousness, is a gradual thing, and obviously that evolution will continue. And thinking about where we are on that scale now as individuals,
but thinking about there's still organisms that exist by just randomly moving, basically. Most plants stay still a lot of the time, apart from the wind. But the difference there is that they have chlorophyll, which allows them to take in sunlight to produce food, which is why they've survived.
The other thing, this idea of awareness of self, I mean, to me, it seems that consciousness in general is a way of making sense of the environment that we inhabit. So it's going to be different for everyone. I mean, like, if you imagine somebody like who's really intelligent, me. I mean, somebody like Brian Cox, say.
Okay. By the way, one of my favourite quotes from him is, I find it remarkable that atoms can feel ashamed of themselves.
Do you mean the actor or the professor, by the way?
The professor. And
who's the actor?
Brian Cox.
Yeah, there is an actor called Brian Cox.
But, like, what are they in?
It's been quite a lot of stuff.
Wasn't there a film called FX that he was in?
I can't remember. I know he's been in a fair few things. But...
Yeah. It's quite good.
Anyway. Sorry, I think Starstuff got the hexadecimal code. This is very exciting
quick.
For the colour she invented.
I'll have to put my glasses on. It is DB1C9A.
Fascinating.
And
go type that into one of the hexadecimal code things.
It's called Shusha.
See what it looks like.
It's named on colour lovers.
I'm going to... No, I'm not. I can't be asked.
But anyway, yeah, that framework, if you like, is basically how we make sense of the environment that we operate within, and everybody's is going to be different. But it's interesting to think in terms of we have to operate in a world where there are vast differences in what might be considered the evolution of consciousness or intelligence. Is a different thing, isn't it? Intelligence. But say, for instance, somebody like Professor Cox lives in the same world as somebody who has a very low IQ.
Donald Trump?
Yeah. But they inhabit the same world, and they obviously have a very different brain on the inside of it, or mind, consciousness, if you like.
But they're still aware enough to know when an object's not there. I would say, generally speaking, and this kind of makes sense for what I was talking about, where there's an argument that even at birth, a human baby is not really that sentient.
But it's obviously conscious.
A general thing would probably... It's difficult to say, but...
What does it mean? Can we look up a definition of the word conscious?
No, because there'll be a dictionary definition of it, but
yeah.
there's no sort of concrete, like you say, it's a gradient.
Aware of and responding to one's surroundings. But then there is the other meaning of the word having knowledge of something, if you are conscious of something.
Or if you're conscious or unconscious.
Yeah.
Well, if you're unconscious, I suppose that literally means that you are unaware of your surroundings.
Yeah, but it has
You don't have knowledge
it
of your
does have a
surroundings.
different meaning to
It has a different meaning of you are currently
Yeah.
not technically conscious
Right.
You may
of
become
your
conscious
surroundings.
again, and you will know that you were unconscious.
So it's like the difference between a light bulb existing or being switched on or off.
I guess.
Yeah.
That's a very bizarre analogy for it, but sure, go for it.
Donald Trump might understand that one, but I wouldn't put any money on it.
But I would generally say object permanence as a general rule. Probably.
But that's just memory.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a pretty good thing to say. You're aware of your surroundings.
Mm.
You're aware that...
Yeah, it's not just memory as well. It's the
like from
knowledge
where I'm
that-
sitting, I can see the MacBook's timeline of audio there. I'm aware that there's two other timelines, even though I can only see the Orbiter's one behind the computer that we've got in front of us.
So it's extrapolation as well as memory. And that's where the imagination part comes in, isn't it? That you have the raw materials of thought, if you like, the informational kind of backbone.
kind of been...
And you can postulate things from that.
Something I learned about very recently from someone who's bizarrely actually an artist and an animator is aphantasia. Have you heard of this?
What?
Basically the inability to have any imagery whilst you imagine things.
Right.
You just
okay.
have statements that describe the things that you remember or trying to imagine.
And
I know.
then
And
just
then
have to translate them, maybe.
you can like say like statements about something. Like, so if I close my eye, there's I'll use an example of this Stella can.
Yeah.
So if I close my eyes, I know that's red, that bit's red, and that bit's white, and that bit on the top is gold.
You can visualize it.
Yeah, I can visualize it in my mind. I can sort of, I can't see it literally, but I can get a pretty clear definition of what it is.
So,
But someone with aphantasia could only make the statements in their mind, and I find that fascinating. Like and one of the things they said is that
so there's almost no sort of pictorial content in
Yeah.
their mind then.
they didn't even know that people could do that.
Right.
Most of the stuff we know about brains has been found out by studying people who've had some kind of brain damage or brain trauma.
Right.
That you even have a section of your brain which is responsible for horizontal and vertical.
Yeah.
And somebody
yeah.
who's had that damaged cannot put like a letter in an envelope into a letterbox
Yeah.
because they cannot see the different. And it may not see. It seems to us like, I mean, I can barely even imagine how that would be. And yet people who can't
'Cause your
remember,
entire
can't
reality-
visualize people's faces,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, the other thing is that I'm quite interested in as well is the ability of the. 'Cause, I mean, when you think in an evolutionary sense, that gradient of consciousness, complexity evolves, if you like, to enable interactions with the environment that become a survival kind of necessity, if you like. But in terms of creativeness, is what to me, I think there is some mileage in the idea of constructing your own consciousness elevation, if you like. I suppose it would be that, like, you as a self-aware human being, you can choose what your activities are, and you can choose to define what information you input, if you like, from the outside world. You can choose to take a university degree, or you can choose to watch a particular TV program. You can make the decision
to,
so in essence,
voluntarily take in more information.
But all that information,
rather than just responding to
all that information, is essentially kind of building the architecture of your consciousness for the future. So,
and as a way to get food in our modern world, taking a university course might be very well better for your survival, because that means that you'll have a job, maybe. Although the way that the world's going, it's a fucking mess anyway, but whatever.
So in essence, I suppose imagination is the architect.
I would say there's a difference there, that imagination, or I think probably a good step for that, which was in the Codes Goes Out video, language, is a definition of something a bit higher up in terms of intelligence, which is sapience.
Right. See, I always thought the definition of sapience was self-awareness.
It's sort of a high level of... I think it is...
See, whenever I hear that word, I think of Terry Pratchett.
What?
Terry Pratchett, the
wise,
the treasure chest,
wise,
the treasure chest in that follows Rincewind around in the first book, certainly
it's
The Colour of Magic. Yeah, it's made of sapient pear wood. Yeah, it's called the luggage, and it's basically it's on legs, and it just runs around following Rincewind, and doesn't it kind of eat baddies as well?
Yeah, and I think it saves him a few times as well.
Yeah, and kind of kills people and stuff.
But then again, in Terry Pratchett's world, there's also a beer that if you drink it, you get drunk before you drink it.
Okay.
Because it's like a backwards time beer.
This? I'm trying to remember. Is this Hitchhikers or Discworld?
Discworld.
No, no, just something that I'm about to describe. A monster that if you can't see it, it can't see you.
Kind of.
I think it's probably Hitchhiker.
It's not a monster. I think it's. Isn't it something that's got this? Isn't it somebody else's problem field?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They land in Lord's cricket ground, but they've got the somebody else's problem drive or whatever, and so nobody sees it. Because it's sort of a case of if it's not affecting you, it's not there.
I do.
It's a good way to approach life, actually.
I like
it's not affecting you. Shut up.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. So sapient definition: wise or attempting to appear wise. Sapient versus sentient. Most animals are sentient. Yes, you can correctly say your dog is sentient, but only humans are sapient. I think that's a wide-ranging thing to say, isn't it? Yeah, I'm looking at someone's blog here. I can't really trust that. Sorry. I'm not sure that you could necessarily say that only humans are sapient. I mean, maybe that comes from the whole idea of Homo sapiens.
Well, yeah, that's where the word, that's where the etymology comes from generally.
Yeah, but just because humans have a characteristic doesn't mean that it's not shared with any other.
But I think often creatures. That it's used to describe an ability to use tools. But actually some other apes have been able to use tools, so
dolphins play as well. Play games. Just for no reason, no other reason than if they find it fun.
Yeah.
They kind of play basketball with a bit of seaweed.
When you think of evolution working in branches like a tree, it would make sense that there will be other forms of advanced development that are different to ours but just as advanced.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about dolphins particularly, actually.
But they're mammals as well, so
you
don't even have to go billions of years back.
No.
To see our common ancestor there.
I'm thinking Tolkien now as well, though. I mean, I know it's fiction, but the whole idea of whether or not trees.
But
Who said it's fiction? News to me.
but
Ents, they do talk
No.
very slowly. Sorry, carry on.
like, imagine. I mean, there
Ent.
probably is life on another planet somewhere in the universe.
Mm.
Probabilistically, that is something that exists.
Hmm.
Whether or not it's sentient or sapient.
Unless you're a flat earther.
Well, yes, but then nothing makes sense and everything's bullshit anyway, so whatever the fuck off.
Yeah, that's about as much reference as Ego's getting. Sorry, Craig. Carry on.
Anyway, my brain has stopped, and
I've just hijacked your train of thought.
yeah,
See what he's done.
yeah, there's probably life on other planets. There may be even life on another planet in this galaxy. Whoop-de-fucking-do.
Do you think there was ever life on Mars? Sorry, carry on.
That's of debate.
It's a TV program with John Simmons, isn't it?
Oh my god.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's interesting, the canals on Mars and all that sort of
All I
stuff.
know about that is that the US version is very different and shit.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, that's usually the case, isn't it? Just. Although
the US in-betweeners.
Is there one?
Yes.
No. I'm
Very
actually
bizarre.
quite interested in seeing the US version of The Office. Simply because I've heard it's quite good, and I do quite like.
Yeah.
What's his
That
name?
actually looks better in some respects.
What's his name?
Steve Coogan?
Carell.
Steve Carell.
Carell, yeah.
Coogan is the one that does Alan Partridge, I think.
Yes. Which I think is another series of coming back. We seem to have just veered off topic.
Yeah.
Not very
really
conscious of your
drastically.
topic, are you?
Who cares?
Anyhow, right, so there's probably life somewhere else in the universe. However, it's going to be pretty different and bizarre. There's probably entirely new categorizations of species that are separate from like
Well, we tend
mammals
to
and reptiles and the likes.
there has been, I don't know if there still is, but there has been an assumption that life has to be carbon based, isn't
Yeah.
there? And I think certainly series like Star Trek, as I very often mention, have come up with the well, obviously, I mean the obvious example would be androids or AI. That's silicon based.
Largely, there probably is some carbon in there somewhere.
But the essential ingredient in the way that we're thought of as carbon based life forms, they would be thought of as silicon based life forms, because that's the essential ingredient in their kind of circulatory system, if you like. Their kind of
Did you know Kim Kardashian is silicon based?
partly.
She's also not sapient.
Do you think her boobs could become self-aware?
Doubt it. Let's
Start moving around.
let's
If they did, they might try and kill themselves or something.
let's direct the conversation elsewhere. I just mentioned that as a brief joke because I find brief jokes sometimes funny.
Thank you for that. Boob jokes are always appropriate, and
Don't find them funny when I was talking about them at the dinner table earlier.
Yeah, but that's because you're my mother. There's
Well,
different
I'm-
contexts.
Yeah,
I'm
but they
here
were-
and I've heard your boob.
they were Yorkshire puddings.
Your boob Yorkshire pudding.
They're just basically out of Yorkshire puddings.
So from now on, can I refer to your boobs as Yorkshire puddings?
Can do.
Thank you. Get the salt and vinegar out.
Yeah. And gravy. It's fun embarrassing your children, isn't it?
Now Firebolt wishes he was unconscious.
I wish I was dead.
That can be arranged.
Anyway, yeah. So if it is based on something different, like I don't know, gallium. Although I think that would be a weird one because that means it would probably melt at not at room temperature, but like in your hand. Can you imagine if you touch someone and it just melted?
You'd be fine if you lived on a cold planet.
Yeah, well, that's the point. But if you actually touch them like with your warm hand, because we've got a
Kill them.
body temperature of about
Murderer.
37 degrees, then you probably
Yeah, but
will
heat
kill them.
transfer, you might get frostbite.
It would need to be a prolonged exposure.
I'm not exactly sure what direction this podcast's taking now.
I like this more though. It's more relaxed.
That's the beer talking.
Incidentally, this is actually our first recording on the new schedule.
I said that at the beginning.
No, but I think we just said this was the first podcast on the new schedule.
Oh, it's first recording, right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
So it might feel a bit different now. Ooh.
Ooh. How do we continue?
Well, I want to keep talking about alien life and shit. And also animal welfare.
Alien life and shit. Alien shit.
Oh, we will have an episode on it. But yeah,
We'll have an episode on alien shit.
Not on alien shit, on aliens.
Cool.
Yeah, animal welfare as well. I know we did talk about that a bit, quite a lot in animals, but it's an important issue of sapience and consciousness.
Well, I think that is where the difference is. We've just been reading about the difference between sentience and sapience. Sapience? Is sapience a word?
Sapience is a word, yes.
Yeah, sapient. Yeah, being sapient or being sentient. I think that's obviously. I say obviously. I use the word obviously way too much. Obviously, but yeah, a dog is obviously sentient. A cow is sentient. A pig is sentient.
And pigs are actually pretty intelligent for how shit we treat them. I would definitely say within that even if it's not necessarily. And I would say that it's probably best for everyone to be vegan, but I'm not vegan myself.
What do you when you say how shit we treat them? What in what sense do you mean?
Well, like factory farming, cramped conditions.
But again, I think that's another example of where, and this is not excusing it in any way, but I think here is better regulated than in America.
Oh yeah, definitely. But the world over, there's still certain farms that just get away with it.
I mean, I know there are pig farms up near Elgin because I used to drive past them quite a lot, which that basically the pigs are kept in fields and they've got huts that they go into, if they're cold and stuff. So it looks like they're free range pigs, basically.
Then you've also got the question of zoos. Are they ethical?
Well, I mean that the thing that
they're generally more
cramped.
cramped.
Yeah, but I think they've evolved, if you pardon the pun.
Definitely.
There was a time when they would have been a lot less kind than they are now, but they tend to be more about trying to preserve species now.
Yeah, quite a lot of zoos. I mean, there'll be the odd zoo that's just like Uncle Jim's roadside zoo, where you stuck a cornetto on a pony. But I don't know what I'm talking about now. But
are you talking about unicorns?
Well, I don't know. But generally,
I didn't know my Uncle Jim had a zoo.
Who's Uncle Jim?
It's a theoretical person.
No, it's a real person. It's my uncle.
That wasn't a tangent. That was a train wreck.
Okay, well.
Have you just lost the plot?
Well, you keep ruining my analogies.
What analogy were you trying to make?
I don't know. Wait.
Fucking hell.
There are still some pretty dodgy, sketchy zoos that are maybe just some person trying to make a quick buck off people. Like roadside zoos probably still aren't the best.
What the fuck is a roadside zoo? Where have you been going?
Well, I'm not. They're not very common in the UK, but I think there are still like some in America.
Roadside zoos. What is a roadside zoo?
Generally, they get shut down by the RSPCA here. Is that the right one?
What are they though?
Zoos that are at the roadside.
Zoos are people done in their back garden, so they've just got some animals, stuck them in cages, and then charge people to come and look at them. I guess.
Well, I mean,
Not the garden, but you know what I mean.
The only real difference there, I think, because we know people who keep chickens in a cage.
Yeah, but they don't.
They don't charge people to come and look at them.
No, they pay people to feed them.
But also,
My sister.
Are you talking about maybe a less official version of? Do you remember a few years ago we went to a farm, kind of an open farm kind of thing?
Was that in No, it was Northampton, right?
Yeah, but they had like they had sheep and chickens and pigs and
Yeah, but it was just a farm. They were working.
what do they call that sort of thing?
I know there's
Just kind of,
But it was open to the public. You could go.
Yeah,
well, it
I
wasn't
think they
open
called
to the
them
public, but-
like petting zoos.
Yeah.
I know there's
It just seems a bit strange that
one
you
that
could have something like that.
my
at the
vegan
roadside.
sister actually quite like, so it presumably is quite good for animal welfare. Is there's a farm near here that apparently has done some like version of a petting zoo.
Right.
yeah, where lion goes, Zaria. You can go, but they have rescued
Is that
animals.
the willow.
Yeah.
place?
So they're animals that have been rescued from places. I think
Yeah.
most of them.
You get like donkey sanctuaries.
But obviously,
like that.
it's getting kids used to those kind of animals. You know,
Yeah.
they can go along and
Because
see stuff.
this was something that struck me as weird. I think when we went on holiday to Blackpool, we were staying at a bed and breakfast, and because Scotland's holidays are a bit before England's holidays, we basically had the place to ourselves apart from the people that owned it.
Yeah.
So they got a good chance to talk to us.
It wasn't a zoo, by the way.
No, I know that wasn't a zoo.
Well, except when we were there.
Well, yeah, we took you.
What were you trying to say?
That one of the people there said that like they'd once saw a sheep and were terrified of them.
Terrified of a sheep?
Yeah. Although to be honest, I did quite a lot of
I suppose it depends where you were brought up. I mean, I might not.
well in Blackpool you're not going to see many sheep.
But I mean, I was brought up in quite built up areas, but because I was born in Leeds, because I'd been up into the Yorkshire Dales quite a bit, there were numerous times that you'd be driving around country roads and then there'd just be a sheep in the road.
Yeah.
And I'd actually been and sort of fed sheep from my hand on village greens up in the Yorkshire Dales.
I've been charged by a sheep before. That was a weird experience.
Did you buy from them?
I had a friend that was a farmer.
You do know there are humans that do that, don't you?
No. But I had a friend that was a farmer, and
You sure it wasn't a goat?
I'm pretty sure it was a fucking sheep. Rams do exist, and they are sheep.
You're pretty sure it was a fucking sheep and you got charged?
No, that even sounds worse. I got charged for fucking a sheep.
But that definitely sounds
Yeah,
worse.
well, that's sort of what I was extrapolating from what you were saying. Well done. Yeah, so they like asked me to help out with some jobs, and it just said, stand there, and the sheep charged me. It was just like, what do you want me to do?
Got out it's contactless? Oh no, it would have to be under 30 quid then, wouldn't it? This is getting awkward.
Oh my god.
Where are we and what are we talking about?
I think you just lose the plot.
Consciousness.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, but they're like the other thing was I think Dara O'Brien had a sketch on this about what we teach children, like farmyard animal noises. Even though he was teaching this to a kid that lived in London, it's like, you're never going to see a fucking cow. When is this going to be useful to you in life?
Do you know that actually reminds me of what I was about to say, but it was about monkeys. But I'd get the same things with cows here. You know, I don't know if do you ever stare into an animal's eyes?
I know you do this. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like, because just opposite because we live out in the countryside, just opposite the leisure centre, there's a field full of cows, and quite often when I'm walking past, they do just stare at you. And when I suppose I get less of it from a cow because cows are just a bit weird. But this happens when you go to the monkey house at Edinburgh Zoo. I noticed this happens. The monkeys will sit at the window and they will look at you, and when you look into their eyes, it's almost like I don't know whether it's a projection that it's you projecting onto them, but it seems like there's some kind of understanding going on.
quite
between the
often
two of you.
humans do have a habit of anthropomorphizing. Shut up.
I was waiting for that.
Anthropomorphizing.
Anthropomorphizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some pretty unsentient objects
Yeah.
or animals.
That lampshade's talking to me.
Well, not like that, but like we like to see faces in things. Which is why you see, oh, we found Jesus in a dog's arsehole. It's the natural story. Or like, you see Hitler's face in a house.
Yeah.
Because the little mustache is quite recognisable.
Well, but I mean, that speaks to a particular trait of human consciousness, doesn't it? That we do, and we have benefited from the ability to search for patterns.
Yeah.
And you know that has in a lot of ways really helped us with our kind of scientific learning, if you like.
Because you're able to search for a pattern in something, that means that you can do the same thing again to get the same results.
Yeah.
I suppose is where the scientific method comes from. But it also means, like, you know, if you use this certain technique to fish, that you'll get more fish this way. So that gives us a benefit. More people will survive and we'll keep doing this thing.
I don't feel like we should be drinking while we're discussing a serious subject like this.
What are you talking about?
Either that or I feel like we should be drinking.
What?
I don't know. I don't know. Well, I'm not sure what this podcast is now, because it's something kind of. It's kind of reverted to type, like the original kind of format. But at the same time, it's we started drinking on it because we started having guests on, and we thought it would be sociable.
It's more laid back, man. Now.
Well, I like that, but I didn't know that.
But also, we had like a huge stock of beers for Eurovision, and I don't want you to get completely hammered, or me to get completely hammered.
I can't get completely hammered because I've got to be. I've got a 14-hour day on Sunday.
Oof.
I've got to be up and setting up a recording studio at 9:30 in the morning, and then I won't be finished at the wedding until like I'm back home at 11:30 at night. This is digressing.
Okay, right.
Consciousness.
It feels like we're sort of tailing off now, and there is more to discuss on this, but I feel like we've reached the limit of his consciousness.
Don't go using me as an excuse to go and watch Netflix. Anyway, no, I'd like to. I'd just like to bring up something though,
Okay.
like you know when you're just kind of surfacing in the morning, and you're kind of halfway between, or alternatively when you're just falling asleep and you're kind of sort of meandering in and out of consciousness, if you like.
Yeah, I sometimes find that, like, if I'm watching something late at night, this is usually before I realise that I'm really tired, maybe when I'm overtired, like, I'll suddenly fall asleep, but, like, it'll still be something in front of me, so I'll wake up, which is something that I normally don't do in the middle of my sleep, and then realise, yeah, I probably should go to bed now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do find, like, often, because I have trouble waking up a lot of the time, I don't remember, like, what I say and do a lot of the time.
Have you ever fainted?
No.
That's a bizarre experience. Have you ever? I mean, I would characterize it. I would try and explain it to somebody who it's never happened to as: have you ever stood up too quick and your vision's gone a bit fuzzy? And
yeah, that happens to me all the time. I've got, like, a dizziness problem.
If you can imagine that continuing, and then reality just kind of fades out, if you like.
Right.
And then
I can imagine it, because sometimes I have fallen over whilst.
I've done that in the middle of a crowd at a gig in the middle of Wembley Stadium.
I know when I fainted in the past, it's almost like your vision just kind of shuts down from the outside, and it.
Yeah.
I also feel quite cold.
I've had the
Clammy
beginnings of that quite a lot, like whenever I stand up too quickly, but not like as a reaction to anything like blood or vomit, which a lot of people get.
It's not a good idea to do that in the middle of a gig crowd, though.
Yeah, generally not.
When you come round and you're looking up at the sky and it's surrounded by people looking down at you. Fortunately, my brother was with me at the time. This is where you should never get stoned at a gig in the middle of summer when it's really hot.
I wasn't planning on it.
Guns N' Roses, great gig.
Cool.
were you trying to wrap up?
I was kind of, because it looked like you were getting a bit out of ideas.
No, well, in a way, I suppose I'm struggling to keep it serious. But
It didn't have to be.
no, I'm happy to. I'm not impatient like I used to be.
Yeah, because it feels like
I'm
we've
happy to
got
shoot the shit.
sort of time limit now. It just sort of feels like, okay, we can go off on random tangents and have a completely irrelevant discussion about.
Yeah, I mean, we
Uncle Jim's Cornetto ponies.
The camera's probably going to give out at some point. Maybe, I mean, we could just carry on until that happens and just talk shit if you want. I mean, it's not really a serious podcast, is it?
No, well, that's
It depends on the subject, I think.
Yeah. It's not really a subject that
I mean,
necessarily needs to be treated with a lot of sensitivity.
not like the next one.
The next one's health, by the way.
Is it? Oh, right. Sorry, I was thinking of something else.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's the first episode after I turned 16, so you might imagine what that is.
Oh, so you may be speaking from experience.
I did pick that so I could legally talk about things.
So you could very quickly do some first-hand research.
I will have to talk to some people that I've talked to in the past, but we'll see.
Cryptic.
Right.
I feel like we should wrap up because we're just talking bollocks now.
Yeah, but that's the whole fucking idea of the podcast, breaking bollocks.
What was I going to say?
The other thing that you were getting at was once you get past the sort of idea of the basics of consciousness and sapience, sentience, whatever, you get into sort of, okay, on a human level, like sort of looking inwards to yourself.
Well, that ties in directly to, because obviously being a musician and I'm wanting to write music and that, one of the main techniques, if you like, of writing music, a lot of times people talk about it almost being like taking dictation, and that you listen and you write down what you hear. But essentially what you're doing then is, I suppose, I listen to lots of different music, actually mainly progressive metal at the moment, but they're what you might consider to be influences. Okay, I'm consciously listening to that music, but that is going into my brain and being stored in what I suppose you might call your subconscious, and kind of in a melting pot, if you like, inside my brain is all the music that I've consciously listened to and subconsciously, not necessarily decided to listen to, but all the influences, everything I've heard musically and non-musically, are all in there in my mind. All the sound, well, not all of it. Obviously, you can't remember everything, but it's all in there in a melting pot. And when you just stop and you listen and you turn inwards and you kind of listen to that inner self, if you like, if you can really sort of be still and hear it, that's creativity to me. Because in a way, I mean, it's almost, in a way, it's kind of plagiarism. Because you are basically regurgitating all of the music that you've heard.
But that's
you're also
how music's evolved.
But you're also, of necessity, adding something of yourself to it.
Whilst
you
Elvis
are the new ingredient.
Didn't invent rock and roll.
Yeah.
Most people would consider him to be like the top level of rock and roll. Of rock and roll, not rock, because they're kind of separate.
Yeah, he was innovative.
Yeah.
I think that's where leaps are made, isn't it? Is when there are certain people, artists that come along,
which,
who,
weirdly, talking about the subconscious, that's burrowed in my subconscious because of an Audi advert.
Is it? Not because of my blue suede shoes?
No.
I'm not wearing them at the moment, but I do have some blue suede shoes.
For fuck's sake.
I do.
Ooh, I got the blue suede shoes. Look at me, I'm so fancy.
Camera's just conked out. I think that's our excuse to fuck off, isn't it?
I guess. I mean, unless you want to talk about anything else.
Well, we'd have to do it to a blank screen. The listeners wouldn't notice. Well, they would, because I've just told them about it. Sorry.
My dear listeners won't notice the difference.
Are we going all ASMR now?
No, please don't. It's my baby.
You started it.
It's my baby.
No, it's not just yours.
It's my
There are lots of things that belong to lots of different people. Please don't.
Oh, God, that's not the worst thing.
Okay. I think we should stop now.
Yeah, maybe.
Pardon me.
So, just final thoughts, like a summary of the whole thing. Don't know why I'm wildly gesturing, because the camera's not even fucking on anymore. Whatever, showmanship and all that. Did you deliberately try to slope that as loudly as possible?
I did, yeah, and it backfired because it all went all bubbly in my mouth, and I just had a mouthful of beer bubbles.
Oh, I thought you might have snorted up your nose accidentally.
I'd just like to mention a moment of my life I'm not very proud of.
Okay.
Actually, there've been a few, so I'll probably... No, I'm just thinking about being unconscious through alcohol. Chemical unconsciousness. It's not really worth mentioning, is it?
I guess it's kind of it's sort of the other definition of unconscious versus unconscious in a human sense. I mean, some people will define sleeping even because sleeping is generally something that you voluntarily do. But then the opposite of that would be like passing out and falling unconscious.
You can fall asleep when you don't want to, like that time when I was driving.
Yeah, I suppose. But I suppose a lot of people think of unconsciousness as when you fall asleep when you don't want to, or like pass out, that sort of idea, or get knocked out.
Interesting. It's quite interesting, actually, when you're talking about sort of sleep. It's quite interesting the effect that different techniques have on the quality of sleep, but particularly I'm thinking about sunlight and light in general, if you like, when that comes in through your eyes, that your brain takes that as a signal that it's time to be conscious, to be awake.
Yeah, I find when I stay awake, like too late to when the sun starts rising. Although towards summer in Scotland, that is pretty early. So,
well, it doesn't get fully dark here.
No,
in June.
So it does get pretty hard to fall asleep if you've got your blinds open.
I remember the first time first year I was up here, and I was driving late at night, and I was like, it's just like it's 1:30 in the morning. You're thinking, is it actually going to get completely dark? And then you realise that it's not.
Yeah,
it's just like the light on the horizon just moves
like
around the sky, and
very nearly Arctic.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's not very far from the Arctic countries.
400 miles from the Arctic Circle or something.
How much?
I think it's about 400 miles, is it not, to the
That's
Arctic
not much. That's nearer than Nan's house.
Yeah. So we're pretty close to like being able to even witness the aurora borealis.
I've seen.
Well, yeah, that has been visible here quite
yeah, it's less often visible here, but still.
Yeah, I mean, that does mess with human physiology, doesn't it? Like when
that explains Scotland.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it probably does have effects on. I mean, Scotland's not got a great record for things like obesity.
I don't think that's related to like light levels, because the USA is next, and New York's on like the level of Portugal, and that's considered northern.
That's true, I suppose. Anyway, we should wind up. So, yeah, there we go then.
Very satisfying conclusion. Right, so basically, vaguely, like that video said, and we said later, it is a gradient of consciousness. But roughly, where do you think that mark lies?
What mark?
Well, sort of roughly, where do you think that? Where do you think there's a sort of clear thing? Where?
I don't think there is. That's what a
No.
gradient is.
But like,
well, the gradient they're talking about goes from simple to complex consciousness, doesn't it? So what you're asking is, where is the line of simple consciousness emerging?
yeah,
Is that what you're asking? I don't think there is one, because I think the gradient continues beyond that in both directions.
I suppose. But like, do you think that's something that just randomly moves about, and when food touches it digests it?
No, I think this is one of those things that because we try as human beings, our conscious minds, if you like, need some kind of reference framework to define things as, and a perfect example of that is something like the age of consent. It's not something that, in a natural sense, is relevant.
Okay,
But it has to be defined under
opening
law.
up a whole new conversation.
Well, no, it's not really. I'm just using it as an example because it's an example of
No, not that specifically, but about. I suppose we'll probably come to this in the aforementioned episode about sort of. Yeah, we'll come to that in that anyway. But sort of.
Well, but there's lots of other examples of that. I mean, like voting age. It's that there are many people who, at your age, are more than capable of making an informed decision about who should be running the country, and lots of people a lot older who should never be given the vote, in my opinion.
But then you get to the idea of democracy.
But you have to have. Humans need a defined.
They need
a
line there, because
a framework, a matrix in which to operate, if you like. But
a 2-year-old might not literally have the framework to operate a pen to.
And this is where my analogy of computers comes in, because it is basically trying to define things in a digital sense. It's ones and zeros. Something either is or isn't beyond a certain point. Whereas nature's not like that. Nature is analog. There isn't a point at which you can say that's conscious and the step before it wasn't, because there's no step there.
I suppose it's some kind. It sort of comes into that
emerges.
idea of finding patterns.
Yeah.
Of finding, this is this and this is that. It's very easy.
Yeah.
We like simplifying things in general.
And maybe that's why when you get down to the level of quantum reality, that things break down, because it's only down to a certain point that you can actually see the edge of particular things. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, there isn't.
Like,
I mean, we do it with
extremely
countries,
difficult
it's like
for
borders. It's like you step across a border, you're suddenly in a newly defined territory. But is it really any different from having 1 foot in one country and 1 foot in another?
No,
you're not kind of,
because you could. I mean, in some places you can, and I might do this later this year. I'm not sure if we're going to be stopping near here. Like that border between the Netherlands and Belgium that Pate was talking about. You could literally be in 2 countries at once, and it makes no difference, because.
And when you fall unconscious, when you're fainting, or when you're falling asleep or waking up, is there a point?
There.
Is there a point at which you can say, yeah, that person's?
Would you say whilst you're dreaming that you're conscious?
I personally wouldn't.
But now this is something that we haven't really made clear, that there's actually a
lucid
big there's a big difference between sentience and consciousness. We sort of tried to collate the two. That someone dreaming is sentient, but they're not necessarily conscious because they're unconscious.
Now, I had one of these the other day, and this first time I think I remember in memory of actually having this happen was that something happened in a dream that I had, that within the dream I suddenly realised that the only explanation for what had happened was that I was dreaming.
That's bizarre.
So
I've never had that happen.
When that happens, can you at that point enter what's known as a lucid dream?
Yeah, there's some people that this happens all the time too.
Yeah, I would love that.
Oh, and the idea of illusionists using your subconscious to play tricks on people.
Can I just define, in case there's anyone who doesn't know what a lucid dream is? It would be the concept of when you're dreaming that you are aware of the fact that you're dreaming and can therefore influence the content of that dream deliberately.
Which
must be ace. I would love that.
Something that I usually
I would just do the most ridiculous things.
Yeah, well, the thing that these are usually the most scary dreams because they feel very real. Is like dreams that involve actual people that I know and actual really possible things.
Well, this is what happened in this dream.
Yeah, that feel like that they're set very much in the real world.
Yeah, well,
so like I wake up like really fucking scared. It's like oh Jesus, okay, that's not reality. Good.
Well, in this particular dream, me and Mum had gone shopping to Tesco in Inverurie.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but we pulled up. I pulled the car into a car parking space and stood up to turn the ignition off, like you do. And at that moment, the car kind of glitched out of existence and disappeared. And I'm left standing in the car parking space and the car's disappeared.
But I mean...
And me and Starstuff are running around going, what the fuck's happened to the car? Where's it gone? They caught it on CCTV in the shop, the car disappearing. And then Darren Brown was behind the customer service desk. And it was when he asked if this...
What the fuck?
This was when
That's a very confusing dream because you're never actually sure if that's real because he could probably actually make you imagine that.
Well, this is what happened.
Told us not to tell him.
I said, because Darren Brown asked me if I'd ever had, if this, anything like this had ever happened before. And I said, no, he asked if there was any explanation for it. And I said, the only thing I can explain it by is saying, I realised I was dreaming. And I said, I must be dreaming. And he said, have you ever had a dream like that before? And this is when I told Mum about it the next morning and she...
Are you sure you didn't sign something that said that you were okay with this? Because he might have made you forget that this actually happened.
Fuck off. I can't remember.
I love Dan Brown. He has an amazing ability to fuck with people's heads. There's one time he made someone go into a photo booth to get their passport taken.
He turned me down. When I went to one of his shows, I put my hand up at one of his shows, and he because you went to see it in Aberdeen. Actually, I think it was Did you come to see it?
No, it was in Edinburgh.
No, that was a different tour, I think.
I would have seen that one then.
I went to see it in London. It was, I can't remember the name of the tour. But we've seen it on TV.
It was Miracles.
Yeah, no, it was the one before that. And he was doing like a card trick thing.
Right.
And he asked if anyone in the audience played poker. And I put my hand up. And he asked me how long I'd played poker for. And I said about a year. And just from... I mean, obviously, it had nothing to do with how long I'd played poker for. He could just tell whether or not I was the right subject to use.
It's called
by
reading.
By the way I responded. And he said, okay, and just moved on to someone else. So obviously, he could tell from the way I spoke.
There's some people that are very suggestive to that sort of thing, like hypnosis, but...
which I actually took as a compliment, because if he could see that I wasn't very suggestible...
But like,
you wouldn't want me on stage.
There's a big deal of like, if you go to a hypnotist, I mean, unless you're a very suggestible person by nature and don't want to be hypnotized, then you probably won't be hypnotized.
Yeah.
But then there's some people that, like, no matter how hard they try, probably would be hypnotized by that sort of thing.
Yeah. One of the things, I mean, I like I said, the mindfulness thing, I started doing sort of meditation stuff. With an app on my phone, just for like to stop me being so fucking anxious all the time. But anyway, there's a few times. It's just like 10 minutes at a time with your eyes closed, sitting on a stool, just kind of listening to calming music and getting sort of advice on how to deal with things. But there's a few times I've almost fallen asleep sat on the chair. But I think that's quite interesting when you relate that to the idea of looking inwards and looking to your sort of, I suppose there would be the simpler levels of consciousness.
I have done some sort of hypnotism things online, and it's weird like how if you do really commit to it, that they talk about like going into a deep sleep and lead you into it very slowly before they even talk about what they're hypnotizing you to do. It's
But I think
very interesting if you do actually follow that. Then one of the things was like you feel like your eyes are shut together with glue, and I genuinely couldn't open my eyes.
Well, Starstuff's mentioned this before. I can't remember what the fuck I was about to say then.
That's great.
No, it was something connected to what we were talking about. Let's wind back a bit. What were we saying? I was talking
Hypnotism.
about hypnotism, me falling asleep.
We're trying to reverse engineer a conversation so that you can regain your train of thought.
Suggestibility, hypnotism. No, it's gone.
Oh.
Fuck it. I think we should stop now.
Okay. I wanted to quickly bring
It's going
some
to come back.
just bring some points back from earlier on that the conversation just moved in a different direction, so it wasn't appropriate to bring them up again.
Sorry, YouTubers, by the way. I would probably have got the other camera out if I'd realised we were going to carry on this long, but that's fine. They can just...
You've done that for the last episode anyway,
Yeah,
so...
yeah. You get an hour and a half and then your time's up.
Sure. Right, so abortion in America, the current thing is at 6 weeks, because that's generally when a heartbeat starts being detected, which is a really fucking stupid definition of sentience or consciousness, but a lot of the lawmakers are really fucking stupid, so...
Yeah, but I mean... although I disagree with it, I can kind of see the logic that they're working from, because I know what that mindset thinks of life as. They think of the heart as being where emotion is seated, don't they?
And a lot of the time they have this idea of a soul which doesn't exist.
Whereas people like us know that the heart is a muscle.
I would accept that logic of their thinking if they cared about a fully grown person with a heartbeat and a family and a life and people who depend on them.
It's pretty clear that a lot of the politicians are, even if it is subconsciously, mainly care about oppressing women's choices. But whatever, that's just my take on that.
Women have choices?
Yeah, wow. In some countries.
That's evolution for you.
I also did find it funny that Gregs were better represented on the people that voted for that than women. There were no women, and there were 2 Gregs.
Do you know, I was thinking Greg's were the sausage rolls.
Why were they voting on it?
I thought, how the fuck did we get from abortion to sausage rolls in the space of a couple of sentences?
I don't know, it relates to sentience.
Wow. Can you imagine a
Probably
sentient
relates to the
sausage roll?
sentience of most of the people who were making that decision.
Well, it relates
Don't
to
even
sentience
bother.
of, like, the pig that was in that, or whatever animals they use.
That's true, actually.
Haha. Quick witted I am. Anyway, so basically, however that organism, more an embryo than a fetus with a heartbeat, is the size of a pomegranate seed and a cluster of, I don't know how many cells.
Can you not get a heart to beat, like, outside of a body anyway?
Yeah. It's a stupid definition of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of that is religiously based, and once you come into that, then it comes into faith, and then either you have to convince that person to stop being religious, which is nigh impossible in one conversation. It's more of a personal journey of their own that they might not choose to make.
Yeah, I mean, this.
I don't know. You probably have more idea of how that works.
This fits into the same category as an awful lot of things. I mentioned flat Earth earlier on. That I don't have anything against flat Earthers as long as it's, if they want to operate under that particular scheme. Well, no, I don't have anything against it in terms of if it's how things make sense within their life and that's fine for them, fine. But the problem I have is that it props up a way of thinking which is linked to stuff like anti-vaxxers and religion and eventually
conspiracy theories.
Yeah, chemtrails but I mean, eventually you get to the point. I know it seems like extrapolation, but at the end of the day, it's a gradient. You end up with suicide bombers.
Yeah,
and that might seem an extreme extrapolation, and it is, but it's a gradient, and it's propped up by non-scientific.
Bizarre how blind
knowledge.
Some people are to this. It's I think somebody posted a picture of themselves holding a gun with a Bible in the other hand behind in front of an American flag, and they were posting that because they actually believed in all those things.
Yeah, at the end of the day.
So then someone had a retort to that, put someone standing in front of Saudi Arabia's flag with the Quran and a gun and a burqa on.
Yeah, it's a different.
And it's pretty much meaning
for me
the same sort of
the
thing.
only way that kind of thinking cannot be negative is if you're going to cut yourself off from the society that you're going to be causing a negative influence over. For instance, if you want to be anti-vax, that's fine, but don't live in the human race.
Basically fuck off to an island somewhere
I saw
live
a
by
thing
yourself,
about
just in case you get measles.
Was it that Katie Price, is it? What's being quoted at like a thing that she'd said in an interview. No, she put out on her Twitter feed, that was it, about the herd isn't my concern, basically, to do with herd immunity sort of thing. And it's like, well, it kind of should be if you're a part of the herd. If you want to remove yourself from the herd, that's fine. Do what the fuck you like. Don't get.
Do you mean Katie Price? She's, I think, sort of a model.
No.
Do you mean Katie Hopkins?
Yeah. Sorry, Katie Price.
The shithead. I mean, she's not a particularly great person herself. But Katie Hopkins is the one that thought we should use gunboats on refugees.
Yeah.
I mean
that kind of logic about the herd immunity is not my responsibility. It's like, well, as part of the herd, it is. So if you want to remove yourself from the herd, kind of ethics, remove yourself from the herd by all means.
Yeah. If you are so self-absorbed that you don't give a shit about the rest of humanity, fuck off from humanity.
But when you're talking about,
don't have to worry about.
When you're talking about beliefs,
stop tweeting shit.
When you're talking about beliefs and ideas, you are part of that collective. It's not a collective consciousness, but that collective arena, if you like. You have an influence on the people around you, and if,
otherwise, you're a selfish prick.
Oh, we've gone off on a rant, haven't we?
Yeah, well, sorry.
No, you're
I'm
not.
Genuinely, though, if you don't give the least bit of thought to how your beliefs influence the world, then fuck you. You're just an uncompassionate piece of shit.
Are we going to wrap up?
Sorry, not sorry.
Are we going to wrap up?
Maybe we should before I start calling.
Well, before we do,
cunt.
then I'm gonna make a suggestion. I mean, we should watch another Sex Education anyway, soon as we've been drinking. But I wonder if you fancy watching a Kevin Smith film.
I don't know.
The reason I mention it is because that Kevin Smith Askew Review podcast has started, where they are reviewing some Kevin Smith films. And that's my promotional thing, because there's a pot of adverts on a Google folder, Google Drive folder. Yeah. And I think we're the only podcast that's actually uploaded one so far. I think so. I can double check.
Okay, so
in fact, I will double check now on air. If anyone else has uploaded an advert, it will be going in our episode. If not, then this is my attempt to actually...
Yeah, it would probably make sense to go in that video/toilet break that we had.
The After Dark Podcast Network advert pot. Yes, the only thing in it now is the Breaking Dadvert.
Oh, I still hate that pun.
So I sincerely hope we'll be hearing our Breaking Dadvert on other podcasts within the After Dark Podcast Network. And for those who haven't actually added to the pot, we can't fucking advertise if you don't put one up. So get your asses in gear.
Put yourself out there. Not in a rude way.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we wrap up?
Yeah, before I get another beer out, because I'm becoming...
exhausted the conversation, and we talked enough about this. I feel like this has been a lot more relaxed. I quite enjoy the new schedule, although I was reluctant at first. I think it's going to work a lot.
I'm liking it. I'm liking it.
Both of us.
Because I'm finding, one thing I have found with my podcast thing is that because I've got 2 weeks between episodes now, when I make a recording, it's because I've got something to say and I want to do it.
Yeah, it's not just sort of...
I'm not like, shit, I've got to get an episode out on Monday. So, and it's nice because we've had a chance to miss this.
Yeah.
And you come back to it with a, we've missed you.
So next episode, like we said, we'll be talking about health, but we might have a guest on for that, I'm not sure.
I thought you said Gaston.
Sorry, I really need to go for a piss. We should really quickly wrap up.
Okay.
We're on a timer.
Go on then, quick. I've been... That's a strange name.
Okay. What was the beginning of my sentence there? I was trying to finish a thought.
I can't remember.
Yeah, so we've been really enjoying this timetable, whatever. And yeah, next episode, the European elections would have happened, so we'll see what happens then.
Oh yes, we will indeed.
I've been Firebolt.
And I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been Breaking Bollocks episode 35. I really need to piss. Fuck off.
Run, Firebolt, run!
Shit.
Should we do a funny outro while he's not here?
Okay.
Go on then.
Sure, show. Think of it.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.